Hello, my name is Mark, and welcome to Mark Thought About It. I am your host. I am not a retired pro athlete, nor am I a movie critic, but what I am is just an everyday man with a love of sports, love of movies, and some knowledge to share. So I hope that I can share some knowledge with you and that will keep you entertained. Okay, so let's get started with the episode. And for today's topic, let's see, Mark thought about it. And for today's show, I'm going to list my top 10 all time Chicago born basketball players. Okay? The one rule is that the person on the list has to be born in Chicago. All right? So, before I get started with my list, I'd like to add a couple of honorable mentions to the list. First, I'd like to speak about Maurice Boellis, Chicago, Merker High School in the 70s. 6'10", 6'11", very good movement, had good game. And after he left high school in Chicago, he went to Milwaukee for Marquette, played for Marquette with the legendary coach Al McGuire. They won the NCAA championships in 1977. Bo, very dominant, like I said, a good game. He ended up going to the NBA afterwards, had a nice career. And his number 31 for Marquette was retired. So I will add that in Chicago that I lived on the same block as Bo. So there's a little bit of knowledge I have with that as far as it goes. I can't say that Bo remembers me, but I remember Bo. So with that being said, I'm just going to say a shout out to Bo. Next, I'd like to shout out to Carl Nix. Carl Nix, Chicago, Inglewood High School. Now, Carl ended up going to Indiana State University, Terre Haute, and played on the same team as Larry Bird. Their team had a very good squad. Carl, in his freshman year, had something going on with his grades or whatever, and recommended that he went to junior college. He went down and played junior college ball, and not only did he get his grades better, but his game got better as well. Came back very dominant playing college ball. And by the time, I want to say it was 79, Indiana State, the team, like I said, Carl Nix, Larry Bird, and the rest of their team, they were undefeated all the way up into the championships, 32-0. And they had to play Magic Johnson, Greg Kelsey, and their team. And the Michigan State team won, so the only loss that Indiana State took that year was with the championship game. Carl, even after Larry went pro, played again at Indiana State, and his numbers even increased even higher. Carl had his number 22 retired at Indiana State University. So, shout out to Carl as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Frederick Hughes. Excuse me. Frederick, Robeson High School, Chicago. He was considered what we call back then a gun. He would shoot that rock more times than any. If you passed it to him, you wasn't going to get it back. That man was shooting that thing. He scored a lot of points. He ended up going to Loyola University. And he dominated not only the school, he dominated their league. He dominated college basketball there for a run. And Frederick had great numbers. He left as Loyola's all-time leading scorer in the school. He was the 15th at that time when he left, the 15th all-time leading scorer in college. And like I said, he was just a great shooter. He could pass. He could really shoot that rock. And he ended up going to the pros. I remember him going to the San Antonio Spurs. He just didn't have as much success as he did at the college level. Okay. All right. So with that being said, on to my list. I know that I'm going to have someone out there, naysayers, going to call them, that's going to say, I looked at your list and you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know nothing about George Mikan. Well, I know all about George Mikan. Played in the 1940s at the ball, played dominant basketball in NBA 40s and 50s. So dominant, he was considered the athlete of the first half century from 1900 to 1950. But even with all those numbers that I shared, he couldn't make my list because rule number one, he was born in Joliet, not Chicago. So that's that. Then I'll have someone say, man, you don't even have Kevin Garnett on there. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, once again, Kevin Garnett, not born in Chicago, born in South Carolina. He came to Chicago senior year, Farragut High School, played ball with Ronnie Fields. They tore up the public league. They dominated. Nobody could stop the two of them. They were amazing. Ronnie Fields, very athletic. Kevin Garnett, very dominant. Just unstoppable. But didn't make my list. Born in South Carolina. So on to my top 10. Okay. My number 10 is going to be Hersey Hawkins. Don't sleep on Hersey Hawkins, y'all. That man was a scorer. Came out of Chicago, went to school at Bradley Braves. He was such a scorer. He scored at every level, every season that he played. He dominated, once again, his team, his conference, college basketball. His senior year, he averaged over 36 points a game. And when he did leave college at Bradley, he was the number 4 all-time leading scorer at college. He finished with 3,008 points. He had his number 33 retired by Bradley, and he was an NBA first-round draft pick. And when he did go to the pros, he was named to the NBA First-Team Rookie League, and he was also in a 1991 All-Star game. So that's Hersey Hawkins. My number 9, Maurice Cheeks. When I was younger, we would watch TV and they would have Philadelphia on. Their announcer would do the announcements and he would say his name and he would say number 10, Maurice Cheeks. And we would just laugh and copy that and always remember it. And he was Chicago's own. So not only did he come from playing college ball in Texas, but when he got to the pros, the thing that he was easily overlooked because he played on a team with Julius Service, Dr. J, Moses Malone, defensive specialist Bobby Jones. But Maurice Cheeks was a 4-time NBA All-Star. He was named to the NBA defensive team 4 different times. He had his number 10 retired by the 76ers. And also, he was named to the 2018 NBA Hall of Fame. A lot of people don't remember him as a player. They remember him only as a coach or an assistant coach. But Mo Cheeks needs to be on our list. Chicago's own. Shout out. My number 8. I'll give you the nickname. The Killer Crossover. Tim Hardaway. Tim Hardaway. He was like playing video games before we knew video games could move like they could. He would hold that ball over and cross you over. He was so smooth. He had highlight reel before we called it highlight reel. He played college at the University of Texas, El Paso. They call it UTEP. And then he went on to play in the NBA. And he played at that time. He was drafted by Golden State Warriors. He ended up going to Miami, and he dominated. When he was with Golden State, himself, Chris Mullins, and Mitch Richmond, They had the nickname of Run TMC. They ran that ball up and down that court. Pick your poison. Who you think you're going to stop? They scored that ball. They were that good. Tim Hardaway was a 5-time NBA All-Star. He had his number 10 retired by UTEP in college, and he also had his number retired by the Miami Heat as well. So, and then he was also listed in the Hall of Fame in 2022. So that needs to be noteworthy. My number 7 is going to be one of my favorite players that I loved in college, and that was Terry Cummings. He called Blue Demons. He was a big guy. I mean, he played that power forward. He was like muscle. The thing about him was he was one of those quiet guys. You didn't realize all the damage he done to the game was over when you seen his points and his rebounds. He was just that good. That DePaul team was very good, but he was the rock to me. Now, as a college player, he was a consensus first-team All-America in 1982. And he had his number retired from DePaul. He wore number 32. And I remember he ended up being drafted into the pros. And the one story I remember most about it was while a pro, they started talking about him having heart problems. And it looked like he would have to retire. But whatever happened, being a blessing, because he was a very religious man as well. Maybe it's the blessings, maybe it was the medicine, but he continued to play, and he had a very strong NBA career, very strong. Even as a rookie, he ended up being Rookie of the Year when he came into the league. He played 18 years. He scored 19,400 and something points. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. He played 1,183 games, and he played for 18 seasons. He was a 2-time All-Star. He was a very dominant player. I remember him well. Okay. My number 6, also from DePaul, Mark Aguirre. The thing I most remember about Mark Aguirre was when I was coming up, I was a little bit of a heavy kid that played sports. That's what Mark Aguirre was. But it didn't matter. He was still going to dominate you. It didn't look like he was going to, but he took over games. He could shoot that ball. He came out of high school. He was All-America. He was Mr. Basketball, USA Basketball. He was all of the top things that you can name in high school. And he continued it on when he got to DePaul. He was consistent All-American in college as well. So that time when DePaul had their teams, the bad part was they were a great regular season. The first time they got really noticed by the country, they had Coach Ray Meyer, and they made it to the Final Four. And they ended up getting beaten in the Final Four. Mark Aguirre ended up hurting his ankle, and he couldn't play 100%, and they ended up getting beat. And they would have these dominant teams all year. They would be like 32-0, 31-1, but they would get beat early into the tournaments. But it didn't take away from the fact that they had great players. Mark Aguirre, even when he went to the NBA, he was the number 1 overall pick in 81, and he went to Dallas, and he was still doing his thing there. Dallas, they had not such a good team making playoff runs, but they was enough to be a threat to you. Now, he ended up being traded from Dallas to go join his good friend Isaiah Thomas to Detroit. We got Adrian Dantley, and there was a lot of scandal about that at that time. And because as soon as he got there, Detroit ended up winning 2 championships, and Mark Aguirre ended up with 2 rings. Adrian Dantley ended up with none. That's how that goes. He was a 3-time NBA All-Star, 2-time NBA champ. His number 24 got retired by DePaul. He made it to the College Hall of Fame in 2016. So Mark Aguirre, he really had a great career. So Now I'm going to get into my top five. Let the drama begin. Let the debate begin. Because my number five, I'm going to name Glenn Doc Rivers. I don't care about y'all oohing and ahhing. I can hear you. Ooh, why him? Okay. All right. So Doc Rivers had a great high school career, just like him, almost everybody else. USA basketball, all these type of things. So when he ended up going to college, once again, he went to Marquette as well and had a great college career in Marquette. And he got his number 31 retired from Marquette. He was named USA Basketball Athlete of the Year. All the type of things that came with being a great college player. And when he did get drafted, he got drafted by the Atlanta Hawks. A very good pro career, consistent point guard, did well. But the reason that Doc is on my list is because of his coaching. Doc Rivers, as a coach, he was named in year of 2000 when he coached Orlando as the NBA Coach of the Year. In 2008 with the Boston Celtics, he became a champion, an NBA championship coach. And in case you didn't realize it, he has won 1,114 games as a coach, making him eighth all time of head coaching wins. And that's nothing small, y'all. We're not going to look at over 1,100 wins in a top 10 as a small deal. So when you combine his high school, his coach, college, and his pro career as a player, then you add in the coaching, we're talking about legend, y'all. He just isn't spoke about it in that way because everybody wants to talk about his playoff record. His playoff record is this. His playoff record is that. Okay. You can have that argument, but the stats say otherwise. He's a great guy. He's a great coach. All right, my number four, one of the most athletic people I ever seen step on the basketball court and do what he did with that rock, Derrick Rose. My, from high school on, from Chicago Simeon, that kid laying all these places. Oh, look, I went to Rose, Chicago. I ain't care when I seen it. Look, I watched that kid play. He was tearing stuff up. I couldn't do but ooh and ah. He was doing amazing stuff. And he was getting bounced around like a pinball. Bink, bink, off these big guys. Ball always going in. Finding some magician way of making that ball drop in. So they dominated on the high school part of he was Mr. Illinois basketball in 2000, I want to say 7. And from Simeon, his number 25 has been retired. Then he went and played basketball at Memphis. And matter of fact, they did good at Memphis that the year he was there. They ended up playing in the championship game. I do believe it was the championship game, and they lost in overtime. So that's great. Then he went on to the pros. And what happens? He gets picked number 1 overall, first overall pick. And he goes to the Chicago Bulls, his home team. You talking about pressure. Who gets drafted number 1 overall by their hometown team? And it didn't affect him at all. He came into that league up. He was rookie of the year. And when he was MVP, he was the youngest ever MVP. He was 22 years old. He's the youngest ever MVP that he made. So you got to look at all the things he did. Now, when he was dominating, he was a 3-time NBA All-Star. And he was dominating the league. Now, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Playoff. Bulls had a good team. And Derrick Rose came in and went for a layup and bounced off somebody and tore his knee up. I was at home screaming, get up, get up. I wanted to see that team make that run. But not only did it take him out of the playoffs that year and he lost, but he missed the next year as well. And quite honestly, he hasn't been the same since. He's still very athletic. He's just not as athletic. So that being said, Derrick Rose is my number 4. My number 3, I'm so sorry. My number 3, and I'm going to say this here. Now, I want to shout into begin if you want to. It's Anthony Davis, the Brow. Anthony Davis has always been one that didn't get a lot of props. He didn't get a lot of his share. When he went to high school, he went to a small high school in Chicago, smaller leagues. So it was considered that he was dominating because of the whack competition he was going against in high school. But the thing that also happened with him, he played that point guard or the guard position. And he was, I want to say, the 6 foot or 6'1" type. And his height came up on him, sprang up on him fast to the point where I believe by his junior year, he's like 6'7", 6'8" or so. And then by the time he came out, he was near, 6'10" or 6'11". But he always kept that guard mentality and those handles. So a lot of times when you see him playing in the pros, that's the reason why he can bring that ball up the court. He still has that ability. Now, not only was he dominating out of high school, but when he went to Kentucky, if anybody remembers it, that's when they had all those freshmen at Kentucky. They had different states Mr. Basketball. And that year, Kentucky won the championship. And Anthony Davis was named the All-Star of those championships. He was named the AP Freshman of the Year. He won a John Wooden Award. He was the first overall pick coming into the NBA going to New Orleans. And we all know that New Orleans had bad teams. And he stayed down from there, even though he was making All-Star games. Even to this day, he's a 9-time NBA All-Star. He was an All-Star MVP in 2017. He's a first-team NBA. He's been a 3-time NBA blocks leader. And he's also been named to the NBA 75th anniversary team. Not only that, but the Lakers did win a championship with him on the team as well. So he has a championship. And even though some might downplay it, the Lakers with them also won the first ever NBA Cup championship. So it's an accomplishment. It gets named. All right. My number 2, Dwayne Wade, Flash. Dwayne Wade really, if you want to say came out of nowhere, that's not really a good thing to say. But once he got noticed was from the NCAA tournament. He played for the University of Marquette. And from that Sweet 16 to that Elite 8 to that Final Four, Dwayne Wade was all over the place, making great shot after great shot, carrying his team. Got a lot of press off of it. He wasn't being mentioned a lot until that tournament went through, and it was for a reason. He carried it. He did his thing. So now, after he leaves Marquette, and he had his number 3 retired by the University of Marquette as well. As we know now, he ended up playing for the Miami Heat. And he's a 3-time NBA champion with the Heat. The first one he won in 2006, he was named the Finals MVP as a team that had Shaq playing with them as well. And then those years later, when LeBron James and Chris Bosh and the others joined the team, they won 2 more. So he got three NBA championships out of it. He's a 13-time NBA All-Star. And not only was he named on the 75th anniversary all-time anniversary team in the NBA, but he was also named to the NBA Hall of Fame in 2023. Okay, so my number 1. Most people ought to know because I haven't said the name yet. It's Isaiah Thomas. Zeke. Isaiah, coming from Chicago's West Side, he ended up leaving high school, dominating, did well. Did very well in high school. Went to Indiana University, Bobby Knight. Did great in college. He basically every level that Isaiah has stepped, he has impressed. So it wasn't a big thing for him to go to Indiana, succeed, and win a championship, be named the most outstanding player of the Final Four, and these type of things. Then he ends up going pro and going to Detroit. The Bad Boys, what they were later called. All in all, as a pro, Isaiah was a 12-time All-Star. He was a 2-time All-Star Game MVP. He was a 2-time NBA champion. He was a Finals MVP in 1990. He was a 3-time All-NBA selection. He was an NBA assist leader. He led the league in assists in 85. He not only was named for the 50th all-time anniversary team, but also the 75th anniversary team as well. And he also coached an NBA All-Star game in 2003. And he has had his number 11 retired by the Pistons. So there is my list. Let the debate begin. If you will, use your comments and let me know what you thought of my list, what you thought of the show. I will apologize. I'm coming off of a cold, so if you can hear it in my voice, I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. But other than that, in the comments, let me know if you feel like I left somebody off the list. Do you think that my numbers was out of place, out of order? I can take a compliment. I can take an argument, however you decide to do it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this show. And I want to thank you all for sitting here and letting me spew this out to you. And may you all be blessed and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.